it's about a Web3 and AI. Uh, I have been like juggling between those places and trying to learn everything. And I remember like Peter Thiel in the book Solving Individual. So he in the preface he mentioned about like the AI and also crypto is on two poles, basically decentralization and also centralization. So and I can definitely envision them to have like great chemistries to work together and empower a really new generation of our technology and also the internet. But at the current stage, so blockchain and Web3 applications are still, really less efficient compared to what we had with the centralized servers and also Web2 world. So like maybe on the technical level, so what do you think Web3 and AI could be headed, and how they will be working together to create something amazing, especially for maybe games. So we can see both of them being applied into game development and how that's going to be.
So I guess we can zoom back the camera lens a little bit and talk about what are some of the things that blockchain is good at, what are some things that it's either not good at or just not efficient for, what are some of the ways it might be similar to AI. So blockchain is, number one, good at just having programmatic value exchange, whether it's through smart contracts or otherwise. And what that means is pieces of software can exchange value, meaning money, assets with each other without brokers and intermediaries who govern that process. So it frees software developers to establish programmatic value exchange with each other. So that in itself is fairly transformative because it gives rise to things like marketplaces for assets that don't need to be controlled by any one party. But I think more importantly, for people that are building software today, the ability to tap into something like a marketplace, like an auction system, for example, is powerful because it's one less thing that you either have to build yourself or go to some other authority and ask them for permission to participate in their version of it. So in this little creature collection demo that we put out only a few days ago. So we did a creature collection. It's not a serious game, but it's a super cool source code project that anybody's welcome to use if they're inspired by these things. But it uses generative AI and it also uses blockchain. It mints the creatures that you're collecting that are generated through combination ChatGPT and then scenarios image generator. You collect these creatures and then we mint them out to the Polygon blockchain. So what is the advantage of blockchain in this scenario? It's exactly what I was just referring to before, which is, okay, now you've created a game that taps into marketplaces and players can trade things with each other. So you essentially have a completely open economy game with the ability to establish pricing and trade content, just like we would in the real world. Like if you play Pokemon in the real world or Magic the Gathering, people can trade with each other. You don't have to go through the one central sales site. You and your friend are playing, and if you want to buy a card from them or trade a card, you just do it. Like, so, dollar bills in your pocket are basically, decentralized money for the most part. We could argue about all the aspects of it, but at least while it's sitting in your wallet, you can just trade it with other people. You didn't have to ask for permission to do that. Magic the Gathering cards are the same thing. If you want to trade the card, you just do it. You don't ask. So the ability to trade assets around a game, I think, is an example of where blockchain allows these smaller teams to tap into a whole ecosystem of capabilities that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. And at the highest level, that's part of what artificial intelligence is doing. It's allowing you to tap into an ecosystem of capabilities or generating code or generating content so that you can realize the vision for the game or whatever application, whatever software you're developing, there's a lot more things that you can tap into that get you there much, much faster. So I think that's kind of where it's similar. Now, is blockchain a good way to, like, quote unquote, do AI? That seems, I know it's almost like a meme talking about like AI on the blockchain is sort of like one of those things where it's like, okay, let's throw everything hot together and then try to impress people that don't really, know about this stuff. Like, blockchain's probably not a very efficient way to do it. Maybe it could be used maybe blockchain could be used as a way to allocate computational resources, which is not specifically an artificial intelligence problem. There's a lot of companies working towards how do you use blockchain as a way to take compute that's available on people's computers, whether that's dedicated server farms running in like AWS like environments, or even just like the GPU or the CPU sitting on your laptop or your phone while you're not using it. Could you sell that compute back? And blockchain is pretty well suited to that because it does away with a lot of the problems with all kinds of currencies that people all around the world would have, because you'd end up having to do like currency exchanges for all the compute that's available worldwide. It deals a little bit better with things like the microtransaction aspect of it. Like when you buy some GPU cycles off of someone's phone, for example, well, a lot of the time on an individual, inference that you're going to run, for example, or even whatever you're doing with AI, it might be fractions of a penny, right? So traditional financial systems are not really good at dealing with money in those increments, and we could get into others, but there are these people who are trying to use blockchain as a way to allocate compute resources to run a variety of different jobs and workloads. Where those workloads tend to be good is when they're not exactly real time and responsiveness. They're pretty good. That this can actually be pretty good for cases where you've got a little bit of time where the latency doesn't bother you, so that you can actually find the compute resources that can deal with that workload, and then turn it around when you need it. So it can be good for that. There's other issues with blockchain that sometimes are an advantage, sometimes are a disadvantage. When you want transparency and provenance and things like that on blockchain, it can be good. When you're shipping off a workload to execute on someone's local device, then it sort of suggests that you're not too concerned about privacy of the data that you're shipping off, because if you are, then you have to get into a whole other cryptographic level of performing the workload, but cryptographically, and then somehow figuring out how to make sure that the compute environment doesn't leak the data while it's working with it, which is a super hard problem to solve. So I don't think that like we're going to see blockchain solve all these problems, but maybe for allocating compute resources. But, AI and the blockchain, it's not immediately obvious to me that it's, that it solve that AI, that it will merge and AI will just be there automatically. Although there are some interesting use cases like we just discussed, but they are at the highest level solving some of the same problems, which is how do you give people access to resources, application components, software that otherwise they would have to invest in a huge amount of R&D on their own, or essentially pay the tax of being in someone else's permissioned environment.
Right. So, and thanks for analyze that for us. And also, like, I want to hear some of your thoughts on artificial general intelligence, maybe AGI. So, I mean, we don't need to go too deep on it, or it's just basically because the AI model is definitely multimodal is a future, and when they take AI can understand the multimodal inputs like a human do, like from our vision, sounds, and also our taste, or even maybe smell. So that's kind of gonna be like humanoid intelligence. So do you have like any thought on that? Or, and also, if you believe AGI is coming, and also is going to have a huge impact on our society, so like how should we position ourselves? And also, from your past experience, that you might have already experienced a lot of the technological shifts from your past experience, and what do you think about that from that perspective?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, I think AGI is a little bit of a confused term, because even people who say that they're working on AGI, not all of them even agree on what that term means. The philosophical aspect of like trying to define terms and then arguing for your term and why it's the right term doesn't, I feel like that's more a job for linguists than it is for engineers, and I'm more of an engineer. So, I guess just at the highest level, people think of AGI as the point at which some kind of computer program is capable of doing most of the things that a human does. And then even within that, you'll get into these philosophical questions like, is it really doing what a human does? Is it really understanding the world like we do? I don't know that matters, right? Yeah. Like it matters to some people who are really interested in the philosophical aspects of it, but I think most people are actually only going to care what the outputs of the process is. We already have superhuman performance for a huge number of things that humans were once best at. So at one point in time, humans were the best at doing arithmetic. And since, roughly the beginning of the 20th century, we had computing machines, starting with mechanical computing machines who were just better at that than humans. For a long time, people were saying, okay, well, you can train computers to play chess, but they won't ever really be like a chess grandmaster. Well, now chess programs can beat pretty much any chess grandmaster. Then they said the same thing about Go, because there are so many exponentially more moves that can be made in Go because of the complexity of the playfield that you're in. And then we got AlphaGo, and we were able to beat the best human players in the world. So we have superhuman performance on these things. I know Stephen Wolfram's post recently about how ChatGPT works had an interesting observation, which is, well, for years we've been assuming that language was the thing that was really special about humans. In fact, that's what Turing thought when he proposed the Turing test. The base assumption of the Turing test is that once you can trick humans into thinking that a computer is another human, then he didn't use the term AGI, but he basically said that would be like an advanced form of artificial intelligence. Now that's being questioned. Maybe language isn't all that, right? So maybe language is really awesome, but it's kind of like Go. Like it's this complex system of understanding and established meaning, but it isn't as special as we once thought it was. And computers will actually just be, I think it's obvious. ChatGPT, they're getting better at that. Yeah, well, they make a lot of interesting mistakes still, which shows that there's a lot more R&D that has to go into these things. They don't cross over kind of domains of computational expertise very well, like, plugging in just like basic math skills into ChatGPT actually has improved a lot, but it isn't super strong yet. But now with the plugin architectures, that's all going to change. They're just going to tap into tools that do that very, very well within the context of language. So we've just been always on this trajectory where we raise the bar again and again and again to say, well, here's what real artificial intelligence would mean, and I guess that's really what people mean when they say AGI. When they say AGI, what they're saying is AGI will be quote unquote real artificial intelligence, and people used to kind of talk in those terms, like we would talk about real artificial intelligence, like that would be like, if anyone remembers Data from Star Trek, like Data from Star Trek would be like real artificial intelligence, and someday we'll get there. And AGI is kind of like moving towards that kind of intelligence system. But of course, all along the way, computers have been outperforming humans. And, so I guess the more important question is like, well, why are people really anxious about this? And for a long time, our economies have just programmed humans. Humans are just as programmable as anything else, by the way. Like from a very young age, humans are indoctrinated into and programmed into the idea that a big part of their dignity, the value they bring to the universe, is equivalent or at least largely biased by their value as economic actors, meaning the skill I can perform that I get paid for, that I like to do, is my value as a human. I don't know that that's actually what's important for us as humans. So maybe we can move, in the best case scenario, we'll move past that and we'll enter into an economy of abundance where we pursue the things we like, and it'll be more like the Ian Banks culture where everybody kind of gets to do what they want. And if you love art, you just do art because you love it, not because you're going to get paid for it. I actually hope that's where we get to. I don't know what that economy looks like. And I definitely think that the transition to something like that could be really hard and really painful for a lot of people. So I don't know how we get to it either, but hopefully we get past this point where our value as humans is associated with our value as economic actors. That's the good case scenario. Obviously, people who want to think about more of the doom and gloom aspect worry about like the dystopian version of that. I'm an optimist. I think we faced many huge changes in human development, whether it was the industrial age or go back 10,000 years, the shift from hunter-gatherers to building cities and in agrarian society. So we've been through a lot of these changes. AI is, maybe it is the most important one so far. Maybe it's so big, it's like when the single eukaryotic cells started forming multicellular organisms, and we're moving on to a whole new stage of even what it means to have life. It might be that, but I'm an optimist that we'll figure out, and we're going to have an opportunity here to explore what it means to be alive, to be the universe experiencing itself, both as humans and with the assistance of AI, and even fusing it all together. So it's going to work out, but there's going to be clearly anxiety and worry and bad actors and all kinds of things that are going to be along the way.
Yeah. This is like kind of bring back what you said at the beginning about the fog of war. So we're like, always trying to find out what's going on, and then we learn from it, and we go, probably like the cycle is like we are going over similar stuff over and over again, and bring us to the stage to where we are now.
The thing to keep in mind with AI though, is everything is ultimately energy limited as well. Like AI doesn't just magically start doing the proverbial boom where like, okay, suddenly AI's everywhere and there's a trillion AIs approaching the singularity with superhuman. Like it all takes energy.
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you, like energy has to come from somewhere to power GPUs to enable all this stuff to happen. Humans actually happen to be super energy efficient. Our brain operates at 12 watts, and we may actually end up being optimal for a lot of reasons grounded in physics for a whole range of activities. So we'll see. Like I don't think FOOM is a thing. I don't think you'll suddenly have thousands of semiconductor fabs just churning out GPUs to serve the robot overlords anytime soon. So energy-based decisions will have to be made. And when AI is more energy efficient for doing things, we'll use AI for energy efficient operations. Now, maybe down the road, the actual thing that we'll find is when nuclear fusion is a thing and everyone's got solar panels, maybe energy will eventually be close to free. Like energy still costs a lot. Energy is hard to produce. And maybe that's the thing that AI will lead us to, is like the need for nuclear fusion on every street corner to produce unlimited free energy will be the thing that actually enables this. And of course, just in the last year, there's been some progress on nuclear fusion, but it's also not super close. Like we're not about to commercialize free energy for everybody. But there is this underlying problem that to really make AI, completely pervasive, use it for absolutely everything, you've got to solve an energy problem, which is at the root of a lot of applications that you might otherwise not use it for.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah.
So we're coming up on the end of the hour. But we also wanted to ask a little bit about your writing and media career, because it's quite prolific as you've been exploring all these arenas and founding and successfully exiting companies. So, beyond that work, how did you first get started with writing and media, and how did you make time for those pursuits while you were building companies?
So a couple of things that I've just found really valuable for myself is that the act of writing allows me to gain a more holistic understanding of a field, because it forces me to structure my understanding. So just that act of writing is an incredible tool for understanding a subject. Second, I open source that by putting it out there. And I've learned that it's better to put out even partially formed ideas and get people's reaction to them, because I learn a lot from what people have to say about things. I think I get things right a lot of the time, but I don't always get things right. And that's sort of the spirit of open source and software, open sourcing things. The best software in the world is open sourced because it is exposed to a lot of observers who can figure out, security flaws, operational flaws, add to it. And I think that you could extend that to all forms of thinking. So I like to just put my thinking out there, structuring it, putting it forth into the marketplace of ideas so I can get reactions to it and improve my own thinking over time. So that's where I benefit from it. And there's also just an aspect of like, when I get up in the morning, I'm usually thinking about something, and unless I write it, I can get stuck and I won't move on to other things that I actually need to get done that day. So I find it just super valuable. Like I wake up early, often, 5, 6 a.m. is when I'm getting up. I wake up, I have an idea. I'll spend the first 2 or 3 hours of every day just working on ideas or learning something new. That's when I'll tend to write some of this stuff and get it out. Because again, crystallizes thoughts for me, and also allows me to kind of get it out of the brain into silicon online on the internet, react to it, and also form incredible relationships with people through that, even with and especially with people who thought I got something wrong. Like, some of those are the best relationships I've got, because then I've gotten to really know people who I respect intellectually and have creative ideas. And I love to be persuaded to the other side of something. It's not easy, not always easy to persuade me, but I love it when people do.
Nice.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for giving us a glimpse into that process. And yeah, I can see how it forms kind of a flywheel, I imagine, that also helps your work after that morning writing session, because I imagine, or it seems like a lot of the things you're writing about are, maybe it's not related to a lot of like the core business of Beamable, for instance, but it can help keep you at that speed run to the edge of what's going on in the field.
Yeah, it always actually is related to Beamable, even if it isn't completely obvious all the time, because what we're trying to do at Beamable is enable creativity through game making. And this whole thing that people call the metaverse, people want to kind of have their own technical definition. For some people, it's blockchain. For some people, it's AR, VR. For some people, it's Roblox, like virtual worlds. Right. To me, it's actually about your digital identity online, and the growing importance of how much we invest in our digital identities online, and the extension of your identity is your creativity. It's the actual expression that you have online. So the place that we've chosen to fight our first battles is game development. In the future, it'll mean all things in immersive media online, the metaverse, as people talk about it. And when you look at what we have to do to enable this next generation of game making, metaverse experience building, you have to be able to bring these pieces together, whether it's blockchain elements for people that want to incorporate open economies and marketplaces, whether it's artificial intelligence and incorporating generative elements either into the production process or the actual gameplay, whether it's cloud native technologies so you can scale up. It's all there. Like, where we've tried to focus Beamable is at the center of all these things, so that we can be that compositional framework that enables people to drag and drop capabilities in and ultimately speak whole worlds into existence. So that's why I talk about all of these things.
Yeah. So it all does kind of fit in together.
I think so. Yeah. Maybe not always, or maybe it's an area where I'm initially curious, and then I learn how it fits in, and I spend a lot more time with it. Generative AI would be part of that. I started talking about it, roughly 3 years ago, when I saw things like AI Dungeon, and I was just sort of excited about it as a new media for game making, like having virtual beings and characters and storytelling. To me, showed me a path forward for new kinds of games that didn't exist yet. Now it's that still, and it's also implementing parts of the production process of building games as well. So, it started there, and then we figured out how to really bring it into a framework so that any game developer can start making use of it at Beamable. So, yes, I guess it's my long way of saying I think all this stuff fits together, but game making is where art meets the science and craft of building games through the formation of these virtual worlds that are games. Games are a kind of virtual world. In the future, the metaverse will be many other kinds of virtual worlds as well that inherit game-like properties, but it won't always be games. And we just want to make sure that we give people the easiest path forward to do all of that creativity.
That's great.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm looking forward to a Beamable holodeck coming out 2030.
We're working on it.
All right. So we've covered like a lot in this interview, and maybe one last thing, like how should folks follow you to hear about what you're up to, and also to to check all of your podcasts and also your writings and media.
And change your mind on things.
Yeah.
You can find me on Twitter, J Radoff, JRADOFF. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jon Radoff. You can go to my Substack, which is metavert.substack.com. So, and I've got a bunch of others. I've got a link tree somewhere on all these places that lists the places I exist. And of course, if you're a game developer, we'd love you to come over to Beamable, and we'd love to partner with you on building your dream game.
Cool. Nice. So our guest today has been Jon Radoff. And Jon, thanks for being part of the craft. Thank you for listening to all of you. Thank you for listening to the Craft Podcast. And for more links and information about this episode, or to listen to more episodes, you can search for the Craft Podcast by Daniel Tedesco and Michael Du on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. And see you next time. Until then, keep crafting.